Manchester City have just beaten Wydad. I want to talk a little bit about it. If you're new here, well, everyone's going to be new here. It's a new channel. It's a fresh slate. My name is Umir. I'm a professional football analyst and scout. You might know me from the Overlap Breakdown or my Twitter account, where I write long-form pieces about football tactics. Now, this channel is more of a sit-down and chat channel. I don't want it to be too analytical and tactical, although I think there's space for that. But I just want this channel to be for people who appreciate good, non-sensationalist football chat. I've said actually in the next 12 months, I kind of want to position myself a little bit like what JJ Redick did for basketball, but for football. And there'll be some breakdowns. There'll be a little bit of tactical conversation, but I want to have more broader conversations, but in depth with you guys, like we're chatting about football in a way that isn't, that isn't agenda driven, that isn't super tribal. I'm a Manchester City fan, hence why I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about Manchester City first of all. There's an interesting first half actually. I thought the first half was interesting for a number of reasons. First of all, the team selection. I think when the first team sheet was released, I was really interested in the midfield and the attack in particular. And it was brilliant to see actually Lijnders come in. I was a little bit familiar with Lijnders from his games at AC Milan in Serie A, and obviously he won Serie A midfielder of the season. Last season, he's a brilliant footballer, but he really stood out to me today in particular for just how well he dictated from the back. We all know that he's sort of this box-to-box presence. He's got a great knack for getting goals and arriving late in the box, and we're kind of used to seeing that with his quality in AC Milan. I think if you're looking for a Gundogan replacement, he's almost the quintessential Gundogan replacement because he can do all sort of three roles, that sitting number 6, that double pivot next to a Rodri in that sitting role where he pushes on a little bit more, sort of a true number 8 and a box-to-box, or even probably like a number 10, a little bit higher up as that third midfielder if you want to go slightly more pragmatic in the midfield. So he certainly has the quality to do all three of those things, but I thought that first half in particular, when he did sit in at the base of midfield, he was brilliant. His switches to the flanks were really impressive, and what really stood out for me actually was the disguise he played on a lot of his passes. He was very vertical in his passes as well. So often he kind of looked to one direction and then played vertically, but slightly in the other direction. He played off both feet as well. And in front of him was obviously the two number 10s in Phil Foden and Rayan Cherki. I'm seeing a lot of things go around on social media now about Rayan Cherki's performance. Guys, it's pre-season. I know it's a big tournament, but essentially it's pre-season for a lot of these players. Rayan Cherki in his first game, look, you've got to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt in this situation, because he's not going to come in and light up the pitch in as free-flowing a manner as he did at Lyon straight away. I don't think it's sensible to think that, but I think he's a brilliant footballer, and I think we'll see really strong glimpses of that in this tournament for sure. But he played in sort of a left number 10 position. He rotated a little bit with Doku and Marmoush. Doku starting off on the left wing and Marmoush down the middle. And for me, Rayan Cherki is a player who really stands out as being this wizard in terms of his vision and execution in sort of those central areas. I know a lot of people are kind of debating whether or not he's more of a winger, whether or not he's more of a number 10. I don't think it really matters, because he can play both-footed and access sort of all angles at a 360-degree manner. And look, I think some of the concerns about him at number 10 are far too premature. I think Reinders did try and find him. He's probably a player who expects himself to get the ball a little bit more often because he is so good. And I think coming to terms with that a little bit at Manchester City is going to be a challenge for him. But I thought his partner, actually next to him, Phil Foden, right, number 10, was absolutely brilliant. He's had a tough season, but he came in and really showed his own in this game straight away, actually, in the first couple of minutes. I think it's the fastest goal of the tournament so far, actually. Phil Foden scores, and it was actually Savinho and Doku who I want to point out for this goal. But the way initially, particularly in the first sort of 15, 20 minutes, Manchester City really tried to pen Wydad back through their ball carrying, dribbling quality, and also their running in behind. Doku made this darting run in behind, and we've not seen enough of Doku's movement off the ball, actually, in my opinion, in seasons gone by. I'm a huge Doku fan, actually. I've said that I think in his career he can peak as sort of a top 3 sort of Ballon d'Or podium kind of player. And I know that's an outlandish take. You'll come to expect that of this channel and me on this channel. And that's not because I'm trying to be sensationalist. That's not because I'm trying to get a clip, but that's because I think through all of my opinions and then I just say the final conclusion. But if you listen to me and you listen to my workings, the takes usually make a lot more sense. That's not me projecting where Doku will be at the end of this season, but he might be, who knows. For me, I think at his best, as the best sort of 1v1 dribbler on the planet for a team that can win all of the trophies in world football, I think Doku can peak as a player at that level, but his off-ball movement is something that needs a little bit of work. But he made a great run in behind, and City playing more direct, tried to find him. After that phase of play, the ball was moved over as well to the far side where Savinho picked it up, and Savinho, instead of pushing the back line deeper with his off-ball movement, he actually did it with his on-ball movement. So he picked up the ball, he committed the defender 1v1, he drove at the byline, and in that chaotic moment, Wydad and their defensive structure all dropped in deep to protect their goal. It's sort of innate in ourselves in the moments like that to kind of drop deep and protect your goal, but it's counterproductive because it leaves up a lot of space at the edge of the box, or sort of in that 6 yard edge of that 6 yard area, or on the penalty spot just in front of where all of your players have dropped deep. And in that moment, Phil Foden, with that sense of goal, popped up and put that away, which is brilliant to see. While we're on the mention of those wingers, Doku's goal as well from the corner was really funny, actually. I think, that was more of a case of probably Wydad's defenders switching off a little bit, but he did make a tenacious run and almost kung fu kicked it into the net. So there was a lot to like, particularly from the wingers and Phil Foden. Phil Foden rightfully the superior player of the match, which is an interesting term. I don't know how I feel about that. But yeah, look, he was brilliant. Later on in the game, the second half, he chopped and changed a little bit. Marmoush was good, a little bit quiet, but it's hard, I think, when teams are set up quite deep to get onto some of the chances. And Haaland really was suffering a little bit from that in the latter parts of the game because, Wydad actually had a genuinely good defensive structure. I think they had to find their feet a little bit, but in the counter-attacking situations, they were fairly strong, to be honest. And they had a few big chances. I think their number 4, his name slips me, but he was really impressive actually. And I think I had a look after the game. I think 31-year-old, something around about that age, and he used to play in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, one of the South African Players of the Year in 2020, 2019, something like that. But he was really impressive. A live wire, making things happen. There was a moment where he sort of kneed and headed it over a couple of players in the box and made the right decision in passing it to his teammates. So he really stood out. He was really impressive. And I really like sort of seeing the variety in players. Amrabat as well, actually. I thought he was impressive in the first half. It was funny to see, actually. He's a player who kind of slips my mind. But when you see these teams play, it kind of brings all of these interesting names back to the forefront and these interesting styles. So I kind of really like the matchups. City could have probably been more imposing, but in the first game of the tournament, it's fine to kind of feel your way into it. We've talked about some of the players. We've talked about kind of this change in Guardiola in terms of he wants to go a bit more attacking, I think, and wants to kind of maximize the creativity in his side rather than going sort of very pragmatic in his midfield. I want to point out a couple of things I noticed in terms of the changes I've seen in his style, and it's very early on, so you might tweak these anyway. But he tried to press in a 4-2-4 at times, which was really interesting. Cherki actually pressed down the middle with Marmoush. At times, it's dropped into a 4-4-2. So Marmoush and Cherki were the front two players. And then you had Lijnders and Phil Foden actually sort of as the central midfield or the double pivot behind them. Phil Foden is very leggy, actually. I always say he's quite tenacious. He's got a good press. He's got a decent tackle on him. So I don't mind him in that pivot position. Obviously, I don't think it's a long-term solution this season, but I'd love to see him kind of develop that skill set later on in his career. And he had to kind of run out and vacate that centre zone when that initial press was bypassed. I think it's very interesting that, Pep Lijnders has come in, who's very high on counter-pressing and this intensity in his team's game. And that's probably something that Guardiola is trying to implement and add a little bit into. Cherki's had a lot of criticism online about not being the best out of possession and how do you accommodate that. But I thought him playing in one of the front two positions in a 4-4-2 press or a 4-2-4 press, he did a good job. Certainly a serviceable job in a way that, for example, Erling Haaland has done in the past. One other point I'll actually mention is in that sort of 4-2-4 shape, sometimes the wingers actually press more narrow and then your two your two strikers in that shape can sit a little bit deeper on the opposition's double pivot, and that's kind of a way you get around not having the most athletic players in your front line pressing. Instead of getting your strikers, your less athletic strikers to press the opposition's back line, you kind of get them to sit on the double pivot. And Flick did this brilliantly with Lewandowski. He had Lamine and Rafinha kind of press the opposition higher up, and then had Lewandowski sit on the opposition's defensive midfielder. I think Cherki doing that is a possible solution if he does play down the middle, and I think I'd probably prefer that rather than having him out wide. So a lot of people talk about Cherki as playing down the middle rather than out wide, but I think his out of possession game being catered for a little bit can explain that, as well as also he's literally 2-footed and he's brilliant in the small spaces. So I'm sure we'll see more from Cherki in terms of his on-ball quality. I think he was serviceable off the ball. The wingers were bright and electric. There's a new intensity to Manchester City's Guardiola. Guardiola's Manchester City, and it's all exciting. I think we'll need more games to see if Manchester City do play in a more freer, creative manner. Obviously this game probably wasn't the best example of that. They were still relatively rigid, but in the interactions between the wingbacks, the fullbacks, Rico Lewis and Nico Riley coming into midfield, coming into number 10 positions, the rotations between obviously the wingers and the number 10s, there was still some, I would say, positional fluidity. But yeah, generally it looked like a 2-3-5 or a 3-2-5, despite players moving between those various 2-3-5 positions. But yeah, a really enjoyable first 20-30 minutes. It petered out a little bit. Let me know what you guys think of this sort of more chatty, long form video. I really enjoy doing this. I think it's a way to kind of get my thoughts out of my head, improve my ability to verbalize them, although I've been doing that on the Overlaps Breakdown channel in one take for the best part of a season now. And also I think it facilitates a lot of interesting conversations. Let me know what you think about the game, what you think about Guardiola's change in terms of their press and the introduction of Pep Lijnders, what you thought of Cherki's game and where you see his best position. There's a million questions. Whatever you ask or whatever you answer in the comments, I'll be sure to reply. And yeah, hopefully we can keep this channel going, we can keep it alive, and we can talk about various games, teams, whoever. If you have any ideas or suggestions, let me know. I really enjoy this, and I'll catch you again in the next one.